Welcome to Day 2 of the 2026 Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit. To kick us off, please welcome Meredith Lee, Climate Program Senior Manager, Second Nature.
Good morning. How are we feeling? Oh, wow. Okay, how was yesterday? Yeah. Awesome. I'm Meredith. I'm Senior Climate Programs Manager at Second Nature, and I'm here to basically give you a Second Nature update. I think that's what it says in the program. And of course, I wrote a bunch of things down before we all got here, but then yesterday I spent the day listening to you and redid everything. So I want to reflect a little bit about what stood out to me on day one. It was a great day yesterday. It was a very full day yesterday. But what I heard from this collective, I would sum it up as saying, you're extremely dedicated. You share a conviction that the work you're doing is important. And you're struggling to deal with and practice in wholeness. What I heard throughout conversations yesterday about AI, about transdisciplinary research, about coalition building, about philanthropy, the role of the president, the role of the sustainability professional, is that we're all working to holify, unify our thinking, our teams, our relationships, our institutions, and our sector. And I'm sure you heard Tim mention at the beginning of the summit that unification is kind of our power word right now at Second Nature. So I find it very fitting that was my standout. And actually, as I sat at the very end of the closing plenary yesterday, the words of my good friend and spiritual teacher came to me. He says, Meredith, we're only alive because the earth still trusts us. And you don't have to be spiritual, I don't think, to agree with him that we're all here doing this work that we're doing for the planet, but we're also really just trying to sort ourselves, right? And so Second Nature is really excited to be announcing our new call to action. You heard yesterday about Unify for Climate. And this is our vision and strategy for the next generation of climate action in higher education. It's made up of updates to the President's climate commitments that we began stewarding 20 years ago, as well as 14 new climate action milestones that you can engage with right away, and then updated science-aligned guidance for climate action in higher ed that you can engage with without a presidential climate commitment. And I think one thing to reflect about the work that Second Nature is coming into in this next generation is that Unify for Climate is just as much a call to action for us as it is for you. What we've observed is that awareness and devotion don't exactly automatically add up to unification. We have to do that work on your behalf. We have to help you with that. And everybody needs help with that because we live in a dominant culture right now that has trained us to think that unification isn't necessary, it isn't possible, it's too hard for us to unify across our differences, and it's easier to do business as usual and stay in our own lanes. But we have to remember that that's the stuff that got us into this crisis in the first place, and that unification is revolutionary. We have to move differently in order to create the communities that we want to live in and the campuses that we want to work for. And so we are super honored and committed to this work. We're very much looking forward to going forward and Unify for Climate with you, and we need you to engage with us. The guidance isn't finished on purpose because we build it with you. Just as we've built with you over the last 20 years, we want to build with you forward into unification. So we need you to participate, we need you to engage with us, and we need you to be members. Because the qualitative work of unification, the revolutionary work of unification, requires quantitative resource in order to happen. And you get some member benefits too, right? So please participate with us, please engage with us, ask us for more, challenge us. We need to work harder as well. We need to move differently as well. But we are so honored to steward the Climate Leadership Network and to do this revolutionary work with you. We thank you for your dedication and for your commitment to the Climate Leadership Network. Thank you. Have a great day today.
We now welcome to the stage Marie Lynn Miranda, Chancellor, University of Illinois, Chicago.
Hey, good morning. I made a bet that my name was going to be mispronounced as I walked up, and I was right. It's Mari Len Miranda. It's very nice to meet all of you. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for allowing me to win my bet. I want to thank the organizers of this conference and the sponsors as well. It's such an important opportunity to bring all of us together. Meredith was talking about the spiritual nature of the work that we're doing. This reminds me a lot, I'm a lifelong Catholic, this reminds me a lot of Catholic Church where nobody wants to sit in the front rows here. It's just trying to, like I'm all trying to speak to the back rows back there. But I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to Chicago for the final day of this year's Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit. As we mark the 20th anniversary of the climate leadership commitments, I want to thank Second Nature and its many partners for 2 decades of leadership. That's truly extraordinary. You know, we are no longer in the era of designing frameworks. We are in the era of implementing change. And we find ourselves right now in an era of implementing change in the face of significant headwinds. And because of that, implementation, even more than ever, requires coordination across disciplines, institutions, and jurisdictions. UIC's 2024 Climate Commitment Action Plan is our third, and we began by establishing the urgency of climate action. We then identified pathways and strategies. Today, we are working directly on near-term, tangible SMART goals that can be achieved within a time frame a typical undergraduate student can see and experience during their years on campus. Climate leadership must be measurable, it must be visible, it must be accountable, and it must be noticeable. Like all of you, UIC is committed to this work because climate change is urgent. It affects our health, infrastructure, economy, and the resilience of communities across the globe and here in Chicago. It's one of the defining challenges of our time. It demands solutions that are scientifically rigorous, economically viable, and grounded in the lived realities of the communities most effective. I want to talk a minute about UIC and then tie it back to what we're doing here at this conference. You know, UIC's mission is to provide the broadest access to the highest levels of educational research and clinical excellence. We are Chicago's largest and only public research university. 56% of our students are Pell Grant recipients, and more than half are first-generation college students. We are nationally recognized for advancing social mobility, ranked first in Illinois and 9th nationally, and our clinics and hospital focus on caring for the most underserved communities in Chicago and across the state. At the same time, our faculty compete their ideas nationally and internationally and annually land roughly $500 million in research funding. We are all about access and excellence and have shown that both can be achieved simultaneously in the same place. Those dual commitments of access and excellence, as much as we talk about it at UIC, I believe that those dual commitments must guide our climate leadership. Climate action must be scientifically rigorous, technologically and socially innovative, and sustainable. That is excellence. It must also be inclusive, community-centered, and economically feasible. That is how we expand access. We are proud to be a signatory to the climate leadership commitments, and our 2024 Climate Commitment Action Plan charts a clear path toward carbon neutrality, zero waste, net zero water, and enhanced biodiversity by 2050. This most recent plan was developed in collaboration with peer institutions and with input and guidance from colleagues at the City of Chicago. We drew from the city's framework of equity co-benefits and relied on Second Nature's equity and inclusion guidance as a foundational resource. In doing so, we aligned our campus strategy with municipal priorities and national best practices. Another important measure of our success is how we leverage our research, people, and partnerships to create lasting change in the communities we serve. For example, through the Community Research on Climate and Urban Science, or CROCUS initiative, funded by the Department of Energy, we're studying urban climate dynamics at the neighborhood level in communities such as Humboldt Park, Woodlawn, and areas across the south and west sides. Using sensor networks and mobile labs, We're measuring heat islands, air quality, and flooding with unprecedented granularity. Research questions are co-created with community organizations. Interventions are designed with local input. Solutions are tested in real time with real residents. At the same time, we maintain a level 2 arboretum on our campus. Please come and visit us. It is a beautiful campus. Contributing to research on mitigating the urban heat island effect while directly helping to reduce the heat burden on the west side. Our campus serves as both a laboratory and a living intervention. Through our Center for Climate and Health Equity, we are linking climate change directly to public health. Extreme heat, air pollution, and flooding contribute to asthma, cardiovascular disease, and preventable emergency room visits, especially in marginalized communities. By testing green roofs, bioswales, and tree canopies as public health interventions, and by training local health ambassadors through our Climate Health Institute, we are ensuring that climate action improves quality of life. We are also actively implementing green roofs, bioswales, and expanded tree canopy across our own campus. Through Great Lakes Renew, which is a $160 million NSF-funded regional innovation engine, we are contributing to the development of a circular blue economy across 6 Great Lakes states. Our faculty are developing selective separation technologies that remove contaminants such as PFAS while recovering commercially viable materials, including lithium for batteries and nutrients for fertilizer. This effort brings together universities, community colleges, utilities, industry partners, and state agencies to strengthen water resilience and workforce pathways across the region. This is what cross-sector collaboration looks like: research aligned with industry needs, environmental protection aligned with economic development, and innovation aligned with equity. Today's plenary topic is states, cities, and higher education institutions working across scales. It's an important focus because we cannot afford to compartmentalize our work. The challenges we face, including decarbonization, environmental resilience, and workforce development, do not stop at institutional boundaries or fit neatly within jurisdictions. They demand alignment between campus climate plans and city sustainability goals, between state policy and local action, and between research and regulation. To achieve scale and amplify our efforts, we must work together. This next chapter of climate leadership will be defined by the ambitions of the targets we set and the strength of the ecosystems we build, creating resilient networks in which research, education, policy, finance, community engagement all reinforce one another. Higher education has a unique role in that work. We educate future leaders across every discipline. We generate evidence that shapes policy. We convene stakeholders who might not otherwise sit at the same table. We pilot solutions and develop best practices on our campuses that can be scaled elsewhere. And we model the way for ensuring that the progress we make is both broad and inclusive. The leaders joining us this morning from Loyola University Chicago, the City of Chicago, and the State of Illinois, and the Illinois Green Economy Network advance sustainability work every day on campuses, in communities, and through public policy. Please join me in welcoming Aaron Durnbaugh, Director of Sustainability at Loyola University Chicago, Angela Tovar, Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago, a great partner to UIC, J.C. Kibbey, Climate Advisor for the State of Illinois, and David Husemoller, Executive Director of the Illinois Green Economy Network. They are implementing institutional climate action plans, advancing municipal sustainability initiatives, shaping state energy and workforce policy, and strengthening pathways into the green economy through education and training partnerships. In doing so, they are working through complex structural and political realities. They are aligning policies and funding sources, coordinating across agencies and institutions, and bringing public and private partners to the same table to move projects forward. They are ensuring that implementation keeps pace with ambition. They are also building trust across higher education, government, industry, and community organization. Their work shows that when efforts at the campus, city, and state levels reinforce one another, we can achieve durable and equitable progress at scale. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists for this morning's conversation.
Come on, oh baby, don't you wanna go? Come on, oh baby, don't you wanna go? Back to that same old place, sweet home, Chicago.
All right. Does that get you going this morning? All right. It's good to see you all bright and early on our second day. We're really excited to share our city of Chicago with you and the state of Illinois. We're very proud of what we have to offer and to demonstrate and to impart with you all. I'd like you to, we have this panel of local experts. We're really proud of the accomplishments of the city of Chicago, state of Illinois, and Loyola University. And so we'd like to get started just thinking about how climate action takes place at different scales. And so thinking about the level of activities that we do, we just heard from Chancellor Miranda about partnerships and how we can be effective working together and sharing across different jurisdictions, and how higher education benefits from local and state or even national governments. So I think that we all can agree that climate action really does not take place in isolation. And so I think that you all are thinking, hey, how can I make use of these partnerships? I heard a couple of conferences yesterday where partnerships were amplified and explored. And so we're going to talk about some of those partnerships here in terms of those opportunities to work together and amplify some of that work. And also we're thinking about the headwinds that we're facing, and something we talked about yesterday, looking at changes on the national level. How can we make use of our local and state partners? So anyway, I think that we'll share those examples and hope that you all can think about how that works in your context, okay? But let's start off by describing the scale of your climate action and its work and its impact. And so just thinking about your work within your boundaries, I'd like to start with you, Commissioner Tovar. If you could tell us a little bit about your role as Commissioner of the Department of Environment and your role as Sustainability, Chief of Sustainability at the City of Chicago. We'd love to hear about the work that you're doing within your jurisdiction.
Yes, absolutely, and I'll just start by saying thank you to Second Nature for having me this morning, and thanks to you all for being here bright and early. My name is Angela Tovar. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Chicago and also the Commissioner of the newly restored Department of Environment. And if you are local to Chicago, you know that that is an exciting milestone for the city's trajectory on climate. We had a Department of Environment that was disbanded in 2011, and now it is back. And we are growing and have about 70 employees as of 2026. So very exciting times for the city and for the Department of Environment. So I have a dual role, which is an important thing that we intentionally decided as a city and with Mayor Johnson's leadership. We are at the Department of Environment are charged with advancing the city's climate and environmental priorities. But we also understand that that is not the responsibility of one department, right? Hence the dual role. We also want to make sure that we are working cross-departmentally to advance the city's goals, and also, and we've already talked so much within this morning about partnerships and collaboration, and that is an important aspect of it too, right? How do we inspire, motivate, uplift, and support all of the climate action that's going on at the local level? Our foundation for how we advance climate is recognized in our climate action plan. The city has a goal of reducing greenhouse gases 62% by 2040. And that's a unique goal. I know you usually hear 0 to 50 or 100 by 2050. And we wrote the climate action plan at a time when we were at the height of COVID, and understanding that, while it is important to drastically reduce our carbon emissions, we also have to think very intentionally about how we do that and advance co-benefits for city residents. So our climate action plan really goes in depth on environmental justice and understanding some of the root causes of why we are experiencing environmental justice in our communities, particularly our Black and brown communities on the south and west side. It also looks at things like energy burden. It looks at what barriers have been historically to workforce pathways in the clean energy economy. And all of that is recognized, and there are specific actions within the climate action plan that help us think about how to address those things. So it is an exciting document, a living document that we still utilize today. And we've made some incredible success along the way. You know, this year, the city of Chicago just transitioned to 100% renewable energy for our city operations. So we own and operate over 400 buildings within the city. So yes, it's a big footprint, the largest in the city, of course, as you can imagine. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, because we've been working closely with our partners at Loyola to share and to support one another on this journey to advancing our clean energy goals. So I'll leave it there, but very excited to get into this conversation.
Thank you so much. Yes, second, I'd like to talk to J.C. Kibbey. If you could tell us about your work as the climate advisor for the state of Illinois. Tell us what that means, and then maybe you could share a little bit of the successes that we've seen in the last several years, maybe since FIJA, and maybe you could help explain or translate some of those acronyms. But I know that Illinois is leading in a number of ways, and I'd like to hear, maybe you could share with some of your accomplishments or what the state's been up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thanks all for coming this morning. So I'm J.C. Kibbey. I'm the state climate advisor. So I'm housed at Illinois EPA, but I work closely, I think similar to Angela, with a lot of different departments and offices. I work probably most closely with the governor's office, but also with the Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Transportation. You know, when you think about climate and all the sectors that are implicated there, those are the state agencies that I'm working with regularly. So, most immediately, I'm working on the state climate plan. I'm told this may not have been the first one. I think there was maybe one that was lost in the mists of history somewhere, but it's the first one in a while. We're going to be releasing our draft for public comment actually this month. It's been a long time in the making, and we expect to have it finalized this summer. So that's been a really interesting process of not just identifying the technical solutions to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals, although obviously that's important, but also the stakeholder work to shape that plan and make sure that we're engaging broadly and deeply. So last year we did kind of a road show around the state in southern Illinois, central Illinois, and up here in Chicago, doing listening sessions with people around the state. Several hundred folks came out and answered the question, what do you want to see in the state's climate action plan? And it isn't just about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We heard about people who are thinking about how it's going to impact their farming communities, how it's going to impact their communities that are harmed by fossil fuel pollution. How is it going to bring economic opportunity to places that have too long been left behind? So that's been a really interesting exercise, and I hope we'll have a solid plan at the end of that. So please keep your eye out there. Also have been implementing a lot of the energy laws that David mentioned that we've been cranking out a new acronym-based energy law every couple of years here in Illinois. I'd say since 2017 when we did FIJA, the Future Energy Jobs Act. And then in 2021 we did CJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. And then just this last fall, we did SURJA, the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act. I didn't name it, but I kind of like it. And I think that you can see in the sweep of those, laws, a slow, sea change in some of the dynamics of climate action here in the state, and really progress. In FIJA, the thing that brought everybody to the table was that the state's nuclear plants needed financial support, and that was very, or they said they were going to close. That was obviously very important as well to organize labor, and so that was kind of the organizing principle, I think, in the Future Energy Jobs Act, was how do we help these nuclear plants? And by the way, maybe we'll do some clean energy stuff while we're at it. And I think thanks to a really incredible community of advocates and practice and policymakers here, we were able to do a lot more than that. We created the Solar for All program under FEJA, which allows people who are income qualified to get solar at no cost in their home. So I think this, you see in our state work, I think an echo of what Angela's talking about at the city level, that it is not just about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and I'm sure I'm very much preaching to the choir here, but it's also about creating real and tangible benefits for the people who live in this state, who may not wake up every morning thinking about how to reduce the parts per million of carbon in the atmosphere, but they may wake up thinking about how they're going to pay their utility bill or how they're going to juggle their bills this month. So that was a great breakthrough program. I think we started some of our workforce training programs in FEJA and got our our renewable portfolio standard that had been basically dead in the water for a couple of years because of funding issues back on its feet. 2021 with CEJA, I think, was a big breakthrough. And in context, these conversations were happening during COVID and through it. And so I think we were all thinking about what feels almost utopian now about building back better. I still try to keep that close at hand because we are in many ways building something very new in climate action and in all the things that intersects with. But we established a 100% carbon-free, not a goal, not a target, but a requirement in law here in the state of Illinois by 2045, the first state in the Midwest to do so. And that involved a lot of back and forth. We also increased our clean energy standard here, that it gets up now to 50% by 2040. So we'll be getting half of our electricity from renewables at that point. And given our generation portfolio here, we'll already be quite close to clean at that point because of all the nuclear generation that we have here in the state. Almost all of it will be carbon-free by then. We also, I think, really recognize the impact that all this has on communities and how we needed to address that through policy in a substantive way in CEJA. Communities that are impacted by fossil fuels, both when they're coming, when they are running, and when they are going. So we looked at environmental justice communities, many of whom have been dealing with this for decades, and created, I think, what was a pioneering model for providing, grant support, for providing job training, for providing, incentives to hire people coming from those environmental justice communities into our clean energy workforce, and really bake that into the heart of our clean energy and our climate policy here in the state of Illinois. And also the communities where those fossil fuel plants were leaving. We have a lot of coal plants here in the state that have been running for a long time. We have a legacy of that here. If you go to central and southern Illinois, you'll find places with names like Coal City and Carbondale. And we found some unconventional allies in these communities that were impacted by closing fossil fuel plants. They may not have gotten up every day thinking about climate action, but they were worried about how their schools were going to be funded once this coal plant that was the base of their property taxes was closing down in a few years. And so I had some really great discussions, as did others, with community leaders in those places to figure out, look, you might not like the way that this is going with the transition away from fossil fuels, but that is happening, and how do we collaborate and make that as equitable as we can for your community? And then I could talk about a bunch of other things there. I'll just say one other thing, which is utility reforms, which I know everybody's eyes glaze over when you say that, but this is incredibly, incredibly important. The way that we invest in our electric grid, how those decisions get made, who gets access to those decisions, how utilities make their money, the incentives that we set forward with utilities have a lot of influence on their behavior. So before they had the system of formula rates, where they basically just spent money without a lot of oversight and got paid the more they spent, not dogging the utilities necessarily, it wasn't a great system. And so we created an integrated distribution planning process where stakeholders could come to the table and look at what the utilities were proposing to spend and say, is this a good idea or not, have an opportunity to weigh in, and also to change some of their incentives through what's called performance-based rate making, where we're not just doing what we've historically done in the power sector often, which is pay utilities the more money they spend, the more money they make, but setting targets for them to hit on equity, on connecting clean energy quickly, on a lot of other things that are, again, important to the people of the state, and paying them based on that as well. And then finally, we did the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act this last year. This was in part in response to the spiking power prices and grid prices that we're seeing as a result of data center build out. And one of the things that we did there was we created the first ever battery storage portfolio in the state. So batteries, you may have heard, are the Swiss Army knives of the grid. So they can do a lot to help us, shore up our capacity needs so we can meet power at those peak times. That as we bring more renewable energy onto the system, which I am absolutely supportive of doing, we are increasingly dealing with this question of how do we meet those peak times in a world where a lot of our generation is intermittent. It is very possible, but it takes imagination, creativity, new systems, and new technologies. And we also created our integrated resource plan. So the same thing we did on the grid infrastructure side in CEJA, we're now doing with our generation in the state. So when we look out, it's one thing to set a goal, but when we look out to 2030, 2040, 2050, we can model what our power system is going to look like and say, well, what are we going to need by then once these coal plants do close down? Where are we going to get our power from? How do we keep it reliable? How do we keep it affordable? And looking 5, 10, 20 years out and planning and procuring energy resources for that so that we're not caught flat-footed with, hey, these plants are coming offline in 5 years and everybody's worried about affordability. We have to get ahead of it. So I could say a lot more, but I want to be cognizant of time, and maybe I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening on the state level, so there's a lot to share. We really appreciate it. Aaron, I'd like to give you a chance just to talk about, I know a lot of folks in the room are familiar with the climate parameters on the college or university level, but share us a little bit what you've got going on at Loyola.
Sure.
I know you've got a lot of cool things.
Thanks very much, David. And hi, everybody. Thanks again to Second Nature for the summit this year. It's been terrific to be serving as one of the hosts here in Chicago, show off our city a little bit. Hopefully I haven't bored too many of you with trying to encourage you to see the many sites that we have here. And thanks also for the folks who were able to visit us on campus on Sunday for the campus tour. So my name's Aaron Durnbaugh. I direct the Office of Sustainability at Loyola. I've been at Loyola for 14 years. Before coming to Loyola, I worked at the city of Chicago for a decade. And it's been a pleasure to stand up the office at Loyola and then move through our efforts. Our office is really seen as an institutional resource, so we have sort of a unique structure. We're housed under an academic unit. So we're housed under the School of Environmental Sustainability, and then we have sort of a dotted line reporting to facilities, and they help provide a little bit of the funding for some of the programs that we do. But being reporting under an academic unit, and hopefully you've had a chance to meet the Dean of the School of Environmental Sustainability, Malini Suchek, is here, or some of the other staff, like Karen and Maya, wherever you all are. The lights are a little bright up here. But it's being within an academic unit, it gives us a real value that we get to directly engage with a lot of very committed students and staff. Students and faculty, and I know that's not always the case for many of you sustainability staff that are at your college and university, so I don't take that for granted. But we also do our work by being sort of an internal consultant, by being a resource to all the academic units, by being a resource to all the operational units within Loyola. And I'm excited for this panel because it's also one of the goals is really to connect the folks who can somewhat be siloed or maybe somewhat focused in their own discipline or just getting through their 4 years of undergraduate with these larger efforts that are happening at the city or the state or in the communities where our campuses are based. So Loyola is Chicago's Catholic Jesuit university. We have 17,000 students, about 4,000 employees. We have 3 main campuses. 2 are in the city proper. One's just outside the city, our health science campus. And then we have another campus, which is a little further afield, out in Rome, Italy. So a little different. Some of the same policies aren't at play. But I'll be there in July, so don't cry for me. But but it's really a joy to have all these different campuses, all the different contexts, all the different stakeholders that I get to work with to move things forward. Probably what we're most proud of is, it was presented last year at one of the sessions here at the summit, was how we achieved carbon neutrality for scopes 1 and 2. As Commissioner Tovar mentioned, one of the main ways we did that was related to our Scope 3 emissions and purchase electricity and the Double Black Diamond project going online starting in January 1st of 2025. But we've also done deep work on energy efficiency. We have a portfolio of geothermal projects. We really try to ask questions about how we use and maintain and operationalize those buildings. But there's more to do. So we did have, we've reduced our Scope 1 and 2 overall emissions from 2008 by 85%. We then had to fill in the last 15% with a partnership with Tradewater. So if you haven't talked to Tradewater over these couple days, please do. They're a great partner, and they're based right here in Chicago. So we've been able to open up a lot of academic opportunities for our students and our faculty. I think that's sort of where I'm going to stop so that we can get into the discussion around networks and partnerships. But if anyone has any questions about what we've done at Loyola Chicago, I'm certainly glad to follow up with any of you. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Okay, I've heard a couple of things mentioned by each of you, and you're talking about developing your climate plan, talking about stakeholders, talking about partnerships. And I'd like to think about the ecology of these systems that we work in and how your either level of government or your institution intersect with how the state and city intersect with higher education, and Aaron, some of your intersections with the city and the state, and how are we looking at these opportunities? Another theme that's been brought up several times is environmental justice. And so I wonder if, JC, I can start with you. And thinking about, we've named several acronym programs by the state, but I know some of those are connecting with higher education, and I wonder if you could share, maybe some of that intersection with higher education, with the four-year colleges or community colleges.
Yep, absolutely. I have been sitting here stewing and realizing I didn't mention energy efficiency in any of our policy initiatives in the last 10 years. So important, the very thing I criticize other people for doing, critical resource. The cheapest kilowatt of energy is the one that you don't use and the cleanest. Okay. When I actually started thinking for this about all the work that we do collaborating with universities, I sort of started to astonish myself with how broad and how important it is. I think we already heard a bit from Aaron about what they've done on campus, but just as a place to implement technology is so key. Like, there aren't a lot of institutions of that size, scope, scale, sophistication that have, let's be honest, a motivation beyond just profit that are willing to implement these kind of technologies. So when you look at, in the state of Illinois, where a lot of our early adopters were on energy efficiency, on solar, on geothermal, right here in the city. Both Loyola and UIC have great geothermal installations, and of course, universities are uniquely well suited for this because they have large tracts of land that they control, which is very unusual, especially in urban centers. So they're a laboratory for deployment. They're also so important for policy consultation for what I do. And when I start working on a new issue, I swear that I'm not pandering to the crowd here. One of the first things I do is I go up and I look about a dozen or 2 dozen academics up. And I set up calls with all of them, and I read their peer-reviewed papers, which I usually have to assure them at least twice. I actually do. And talk about an issue. So when biofuels came up a couple years ago, I did this, really deepened my understanding of it, and that ultimately informed the governor and his staff's understanding of that issue. Same thing with carbon capture and sequestration, extremely technical issue. We just passed a bill on that last year, the Safe CCS Act, and I had to have those conversations with a lot of folks from the University of Illinois and some of our other great institutions here about how stable is that cap rock once you inject CO2 into the limestone under it, and how does that really work? And so those conversations, and also just the output that they produce that dives into these policy topics, it really does matter, because there's a lot of folks on here that are very loud on some of these issues, and sometimes they're well-intentioned and giving you really honest information, and sometimes they're not. So to be able to have information that comes from people whose mandate is, literally, hopefully, to seek truth, is really refreshing and helps you get into the nuance and complexity. I also want to add that we have some great institutions here at the state that participate in a very direct way with implementing our programs on climate. So I have to give a shout out to the UIC Energy Resources Center, just an incredible resource. We are working right now with them on a couple of different things. They have a ton of experience, especially with industrial energy efficiency and decarbonization solutions, which is a very rare skill set, not just to have, but especially to have with people where if you call them up as state government, they'll say, yes, how can we help? That is a very rare indeed. And also the Prairie Research Institute at the University of Illinois. They house our state water survey. Often when we're dealing with policy issues, we'll be bringing those folks in to consult and speak with them. And so they actually house some literal functions of state government, but they also are key advisors. And then last but not least, I have to say, for the workforce training programs that we have done as part of CEJA and have continued on in other bills that are so important for all the reasons I said and won't repeat, our community colleges in our state have been critical for standing up those workforce training programs and bringing that workforce training into really diverse communities across the state. We have 13 CEJA workforce hubs in Illinois. We very consciously did not just want this to be a Chicago thing, did not even just want this to be a Chicago and Metro East and Springfield and thing. We wanted it to be all over the state, and community colleges have been an absolute backbone and an essential part of standing up those workforce training programs. Lastly, I'll just say, tech development and transfer and commercialization is really important. And I think I'm still figuring out how we fit that in with state policy, but in talking with a few folks in the last couple weeks even, I've learned about a lot of new water technologies that are being developed here in the state of Illinois that can make some of our monitoring and our filtration easier, and that changes our calculus on the policymaking side. If we have an easier way to detect these problems, if we have an easier way to treat them, that changes the cost-benefit analysis and it changes the policy conversation. And so it's really important for us to think about not only what are those technologies and how do they exist, but from the state perspective, how do we scale them up? How do we use them to fuel, yes, economic development, but also our sustainability goals?
Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. The state's got a lot of exciting things going on, and I can see all kinds of intersections there. Commissioner Tovar, could you tell us about the city and what sorts of intersections with the work that you're talking about with the climate plan? And I know there's so much more going on that you're working with universities or higher education.
Thanks, David. And I will be totally transparent in saying that when we prepped for this call, it was hard to narrow this down, you all. It really was. We're very lucky that we are in a city with so many world-class institutions here, and to have partnerships built with so many of our universities. It truly is a gift. We rely heavily on the technical assistance and the partnership and the thought partnership with our universities here, and we have so many examples. So I'm going to name a few. First and foremost, I want to talk again about environmental justice. I know that you mentioned it, David, and it really is the heart of our work at the City of Chicago. To think about, again, just the impacts of pollution, the historic impacts of pollution, and how they disproportionately burden certain communities within the city. Understanding that and doing better, and then also as we think about climate action, we really center that on equity and think about climate justice, right? How do we ensure that we're building solutions so that no one is left behind in this transition is so important to us. It is my life's work. It's the work of the department to really think about that and to really center our environmental justice communities in our work. And I do want to name and talk quickly about our partnership with UIC School of Public Health related to that. We have a wonderful partnership with the researchers at UIC School of Public Health to think about the cumulative burden of pollution. We've been working with them and with community partners using a framework called co-governance. So everyone comes as an equal participant to the table, and it is a collective effort to understand the burden of pollution and to understand that from a cumulative perspective. We know that pollution doesn't happen in isolation, right? There are other factors, whether that's legacy pollution, whether that's the surrounding exposures, whether that's the existing health and environmental disparities. All of that should be factored into how we think about the cumulative impacts in our communities. And so we've worked together to design a cumulative impacts strategy, and that was informed by both quantitative data as well as qualitative data. We actually had researchers go back and look at public comments and notes from various community meetings that have happened related to environmental justice. And we put that together with the help of UIC School of Public Health into a framework. And that has been the basis of a policy. The city is in the process and has introduced a policy named after the mother of environmental justice, who is from here in Chicago on the south side. Her name is Hazel Johnson. So we've named the policy the Hazel Johnson Cumulative Impacts Ordinance, and it is being discussed, is a polite way to say that, in City Council currently. But it truly is a testament to the dedication and to the commitment of UIC to stand there with us, hand in hand, for many years, and working in partnership with the community on this important issue. There's still a lot of work to do, but it really has been foundational. I also want to talk about Aaron a little bit, and not just because he's sitting next to me, but just because our relationship over the years has been so important. Aaron and I met because we put together a working group. We need to understand building decarbonization in the city in a way that talks about how we build pathways for institutions to be successful, how we ensure that every building typology, every person can participate in the clean energy economy, and that we can decarbonize all building typologies successfully. So if you're an apartment building, if you're a renter, all the way up to a high rise, we want to make sure that there are solutions for you, policy solutions, incentives, talk about the challenges, the barriers. And Aaron was a thought partner in the building decarbonization effort, which was another suite of recommendations that helped us as the city think about designing new programs, which we've done. We have a very exciting green social housing program where we have a revolving loan fund to continue to invest in sustainable, affordable housing. We have a very exciting program called Green Homes Chicago, where we're decarbonizing 1 to 4 family homes for low-income individuals. All of this came out of this exciting policy platform that we built together. And then in addition to that, we've stayed in touch over the years. As we have both been on this journey to think about carbon neutrality for our respective campuses, we have worked together to both invest in this very large-scale downstate solar farm, which is the largest solar array east of the Mississippi, to procure our energy. And with that investment and working together, we were able to leverage, and with some other big institutions, including Cook County, we were able to leverage some really exciting community co-benefits back to the residents of Illinois and to Chicago. We have a project labor agreement in place on that project. The developer provides a community benefits investment back to the city, where we've been investing that money in workforce partnerships. And we intentionally coordinated efforts with them to ensure that Chicagoans had access to the build. So we had folks that were likely trained in some of our CJA workforce hubs that were able to have access and to travel downstate to work in partnership with the development. So it supports this whole ecosystem. The other exciting thing is that once we were procured our energy, we were able to get a CJA incentive because we were a large utility scale off-taker of solar, and that's an incentive that we got back from the state. So working together, we're supporting this full ecosystem of the clean energy economy. And then I also just want to talk quickly about community colleges. I know that's important to you, David. Of course, that's important to all of us. We have such a robust community college network here within the city of Chicago. We have 7 major campuses. Each one of those campuses provides a clean energy career pathway. So any one of our community college, you can go and have access to a training program, whether that's HVAC, whether that's energy efficiency. And there are some community colleges that have very exciting new programs that they've launched. One in particular that I want to mention is Olive Harvey College, which is on the far south side. Olive Harvey College, you can walk into and enroll in an apprenticeship program and have access to an apprenticeship program that allows you to work for Rivian, which is an electric vehicle company here in Chicago, which was incentivized by the state, right? The governor's office worked with it and to locate Rivian here in northern Illinois, and that has created another exciting ecosystem. So we have individuals that are working, that are entering a career through Olive Harvey College, can do an apprenticeship program and go on to a career in electric vehicle maintenance, which is a very exciting pathway as well. So these are the really intentional ecosystems that we're building to support this work at the city, the state, and the higher education level. And it really has taken everyone's investment to support this work.
Well, that's exciting. I love the word ecosystem here when we're talking about all of the interactions between different partners. And I'll add that I've been working with Olive Harvey as well, using some money from the Illinois Community College Board to help promote some of that EV training. And so we'll have some digital media that we can share with you about that coming up pretty soon. So lots of exciting stuff. Aaron, I know you've got so many crossover interactions with Loyola and different city and community groups. I was thinking that I was going to read your bio, and I thought you have so many great experiences with committees and commissions, and I'm wondering if you could just share a little bit about your role at the university. And I think you just have this affinity, which is really beneficial to working with civic partners.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for the nice comments from the other speakers. We're within institutions, and so I'm going to sort of make it real for those of us that are in the room from higher education, that we have a job description that oftentimes doesn't support partnerships or finding ways to give back to these sort of civic opportunities. And so, like, in my experience, and this goes back even when I worked at the city, where I had to fight and advocate to say that not only is there something that I can contribute to that partnership, but also I think in contributing and in being there and being a voice, there's something I can bring back to my institution. So I guess the lesson for this little bit will be just that you all have something to offer and contribute based on your experience working in sustainability within your institutions, and don't take that for granted. Don't be limited by sort of the obligations that you have day to day, but try to find space. Try to go out and make those partnerships, whether at whatever level you feel is appropriate. Commissioner Tovar mentioned, but we're in a great city here. We have amazing institutions, some of which we've already talked about, but real world-class higher ed institutions, and it can be somewhat a crowded marketplace or marketplace of ideas and resources, and so it can be hard for these folks in these positions. I'll tell a story from when I did work at the city, and I would have researchers call me up and say, we're here, we really want to help, and we really are looking for opportunities to engage our students or our lab, our research with the work that the city is doing. And I would, I have a long list working at the city. I'm sure both JC and Angela, their list is, almost immeasurable, but often our timelines don't connect with an academic timeline. And this is no shade or criticism of the academics and researchers in the room, but municipal challenges, government challenges do happen on their own timeline. And if you can be nimble and adaptive, then I think you can be a great resource with the information and the experiences that you have. But also, you need to be on the lookout for when those calls are coming out, or when a policy is being considered, or when these sort of public stakeholder outreach efforts are underway. And I would just encourage you to sort of also be somewhat generous in meeting these folks in very tough and very, I don't know, it feels a little odd saying it, but under-resourced roles. I always say that the people working in city government were often doing 3 or 4 jobs because of the rounds of cuts that they've already had throughout the 90s and the 2000s. And so it's really give them as much patience as you can, at least I'll say that, putting on my previous life working at the city of Chicago. But yeah, it's, I think there's things we can contribute. I also just make a comment, and maybe I'll turn my gaze over here to folks in government, is that as much as we rely on these programs, and we heard so many references to city initiatives or to state policy and how that has really unlocked opportunity for us at Loyola, it also can go the other way. It can really hamper or hamstring some of our efforts if we're not careful. And I think that's why the decarbonization working group was so successful, because it gave us a place where, many of you, Loyola as well, has a portfolio of building types and building uses. I mean, we have, Angela mentioned some building types, we have all those. We have a downtown campus, we have a health science campus, very research intensive, and then we have a very residential, sort of classic university campus on the north side. So those, being a voice in the room to sort of describe how some of these policies may or may not support. I know the vision that we share. I think we're aligned, but sometimes overlooked, and that's not any kind of over criticism there. But it can be just something to be aware of and to be a voice to speak that out. The last thing I'll just say about ecology and networks, and I didn't say this, so JC's comment, one of the main things I completely missed in introducing Loyola is that as a Catholic Jesuit institution, we have a mission of social justice. That's how Jesuits brought education throughout the world, not just here in Chicago and many other great institutions. We have a terrific network that we rely on, the 26 other Jesuit institutions that are here in the United States. But we have, arguably, if you go elementary, secondary, and post-secondary, the largest network of education around the globe with the Jesuits. And so we have a terrific opportunity there to learn from each other, to share these successes, and especially with the leadership of Pope Francis's Laudato Si, and then for the Jesuits, what are called the Universal Apostolic Preferences, and now Pope Leo, and his centering of migrant issues and climate justice related concerns. So, it's really about using those networks at whichever scales, not just the sort of government or geographic scale that we're talking about here on that panel, but also these other networks that we can rely on and support. They need to be a reciprocal conversation. They need to be, real relationships are 2 ways, right? So if it's just showing up and getting somebody speaking at you, that's not a relationship. That might be informative, but so ecology relies on sort of 2-way dialogue.
Well, I'm really glad to hear, especially, Commissioner Tovar, you're saying, hey, listen, you've worked closely with Aaron on a couple of initiatives, and some that I just learned about today, that's really exciting opportunities for higher education and the city to benefit each other, and then take advantage of state credits and state policies that layer on top of that impact. That's really, kind of exciting synergy, and I'm hoping that folks in other cities or states or countries can think about their relationships that they have with those partners that maybe haven't been tapped yet or explored. And I'm wondering if, I'll throw it out to anybody, about maybe examples of other partnerships, other civic engagements between, a governmental entity and higher education that has been inspiring for you. Anybody out there like you had an example of?
So, sure, I'll just jump back in, thanks. But back in my city days, I was able to serve in a couple networks. One of them was called Chicago Wilderness. It's a large biodiversity conservation focused network, including government down to the smallest friends of whatever group here in the region. It's really based on the ecology of the region, not on political boundaries. And that was a terrific way to really show, I think, sort of that sort of shared level of expertise. There are some stewards who are pure volunteers in their space who know more about conservation and what's needed in a specific part of the region or very specific species or something like that, that they can really inform what the Fish and Wildlife Service is doing or the Forest Service. The other network that I'll call out, and this is going to be sort of an example that I think you all can take from, was when I was Chicago's representative to the Urban Sustainability Directors Network. I almost missed the acronym, USDN. And USDN is city and county sustainability officers from, I think, US, Canada, and Mexico. I think it's North American. That's not sure if it's changed since it, but it was North America. And you could only have 2 representatives. So it doesn't matter if you were the size of Chicago or the size of some small municipality somewhere, but what it really made you do was recognize that you're a network of networks. And so often as sustainability professionals, we all know that sustainability is happening across our institutions, right? We know there's these folks doing academic work, these operational champions, these student leaders, whatever that looks like. And our job often is to take all that good information and bring it up, but sometimes it's to connect it to a network so that it goes through this important transmission and distribution infrastructure, and that needs to be supported too. Thank you, Second Nature, for being our high voltage line. But I'm going to stop that metaphor before I get into trouble. Point at you, and you're a battery, and you're a generator. You're a load. But I think this idea that we in sustainability can recognize that we're in a network of networks, and a big part of our job, and I know we're going to talk a little bit, sort of turn to the future here in a second about how to prepare, but especially in this time, our job can be to illuminate those interconnections, but also, even if it doesn't help us do our job directly, recognize where it might help someone else within your network, going both ways, out into the bigger network, but also within your network, be successful. So those are just 2 observations on sort of this idea of networks and ecology that I wanted to share. I think the last comment is just that, and this goes to Chancellor Miranda's comment about into implementation. These networks, and hopefully you've appreciated this over yesterday and today, are critical when you get to actual implementation. You can go to all these different sessions about planning and about visioning and about communications, but when you get down to brass tacks and you need to draft that RFP or you need to identify which vendors you're going to send out that RFI to, this is the network that's going to give you both a really good list, but also some real talk about what they can and can't deliver for you. So the implementation challenges, although they're different by different geographies, sometimes, not always, this is a network that you can really lean into.
Well, I think you're hitting something that I've often thought about. Role of a sustainability person is really about connections, right? And I see myself as a connector. I'm not an expert in, solar energy, but I can bring them in, and I have partners that I can draw on, and or regulations. You can say, hey, when I was working for Lake County, we borrowed the ordinance from the city of Chicago on how to keep chickens in the backyard. Because if you keep chickens in the city of Chicago, you can do it in unincorporated Lake County. And so I remember those kinds of partnerships and connections, and you don't need that individual expertise. But Aaron, you're right. Let's move on to the future. Let's think about the next 2 to 5 years of what we see going on. Things have maybe been unprecedented on the national level. So thinking about what you can see in your scope of work, just briefly, really, because we're running up on time. It's just really amazing because there's so much good stuff. So what are some of the most exciting things that you see coming in terms of collaborations and opportunities looking ahead? And maybe I'll start with you again, JC.
Sure. Well, I think the one thing to say, a recurring theme here has been like the national headwinds, and I will just say, as tough as that is, and I don't want to downplay it because it is tough. Subnational has been the heartbeat of climate action in the United States since I've been doing this. Like, we had a couple, runs at federal policy that were exciting and yielded some dividends, but the day in and day out work of climate action has happened at the state level, at the city and other, municipal levels, and in in private organizations. So as tough as that is, I don't think that it's that unusual, and there is still a lot of things that we can do that we haven't. That said, a lot of our progress, excuse me, in the last 10 years or so has been in the power sector. And that's where the tech has been readily available. I think we all understand it. We're talking about it. I think the next 5, 10 is going to be about transportation, and it's going to be about buildings. If you look at the state's power sector emissions, they've fallen off a cliff in the last 10 years, and they're set to continue doing that. But what has been more stubborn are the buildings and the transportation. And there's a whole set of logistical and financing challenges that we're going to have to overcome. And so certainly I think, as we have seen in other areas, universities are going to be a test bed, an early adopter, a hotspot for a lot of this infrastructure. I think there's lessons learned that we can pull from the work that you all are doing at the city and state level. So I'm excited to see what we can do on buildings and transportation. And then, somewhat in the power sector, I guess to go back on what I said, data centers. They're a challenge. I think we all recognize that they're a challenge because we haven't had load growth in electricity in 20 years here, and we kind of forgot how to do it. But they're also an opportunity, because guess what? We have load growth again, and so that creates opportunities for us to invest in the grid. We have a bunch of companies who, in some cases, almost literally seem to have more money than they know what to do with. And so this is an opportunity to catalyze investments in the electric grid and in clean generation that are going to enable all that other stuff. Because guess what? We can't do our all-electric buildings and our electric vehicles unless that is built on a strong foundation of a ton of clean energy generation and a smart electric grid that can support that. The other thing I'll say, affordability is really front of mind for folks right now. I feel like there was a brief era where it was we have to do climate action, whatever the cost. And I love that passion, but I think, maybe that was always misguided. But I think we're in a world now where we are seeing how important affordability is, not just morally, but politically too. And so that becomes even more important to how do we do these partnerships to find the most efficient ways to implement all these technologies, because even as we're scaling clean generation and electric vehicles and clean buildings at what need to be unprecedented levels in order to hit the Paris Climate Agreement and other targets, we have to be doing good things for people's affordability, and that's what they expect of state government, that we're going to reduce their electricity bills, and that's a really tough challenge. But I think continuing to partner with the really smart folks at higher education institutions and cities like Chicago is the only way that we're going to be able to get our hands around tough problems like that.
Cool, thanks so much. Hey, Commissioner Tovar, what do you think about the next 2 to 5 years, and what do you find exciting?
I don't know if I would say, I guess excitement is the right term. I would say, where I'm focused and where I think that, we are spending a lot of time now is, just grappling with the realities of where we are with, federal deregulation and with funding, and to really think about how we navigate that in this moment. And that certainly isn't the exciting part. That's the really hard part, right? I think where we are going next is really leaning into some of those partnerships that I described. You mentioned that we have always been underfunded, or we've been underfunded for a long time, and I know I'm speaking to the choir here, right? We're all grappling with lack of resources, and everybody needs more money to do implementation, right? But I think in that in practice means that we are all very scrappy, that we're smart, that we can navigate difficult challenges, and that we can build partnerships together to focus on implementation. And that is really where a lot of my time is spent, is going back to the connecting, encouraging people to break down those silos, to come together now more than ever. We don't have time for silos in this moment. We need to continue to build out those tables and to think about how we are going to design implementation here now. And we're not getting the Inflation Reduction Act back, right? That investment is gone for right now. And so we're all struggling with that reality, right? Everybody was so excited for this investment in our EJ communities, into clean energy technologies, into innovation, and that vanished, right? And so we have to think, what resources do we have in front of us, and how can we work together in partnership? We're doing that in a number of different ways, and really thinking about how to leverage funding that exists today, but in a new way. I'll talk quickly about heat mitigation, because +1 to everything JC said related to energy, but I'll just take us on a different path for the sake of time. Heat mitigation is still something that we're grappling with. It's still an equity issue here in the city of Chicago, and we have been working with our university partners. And then, in addition to that, navigating new ways of making those investments through the city's capital budget, right? So this is an infrastructure budget that has existed every year, right? And we have, the city can make investments in green infrastructure and nature-based solutions through that fund. We can make investments back in trees as well, right? And so working with our university partners, we've developed, and with community organizations, we've developed a heat vulnerability index through Northwestern University, which is very exciting. The city is adopting that as our formal index, and with that has come a suite of policy recommendations, including equitably investing in the tree canopy in our communities that have high rates of vulnerability, and other green infrastructure measures. And we've been doing that now for a few years. This is our 5th year of that effort. And that's one exciting way. And then I do want to mention another partnership that we have developed with World Business Chicago and with the Discovery Partners Institute out of U of I, University of Illinois. That is another place where the university has come together with our business community to say, how do we drive innovation, right? Some of these incentives, these clean energy incentives at the federal level, are going away. So how do we bring people together and to really think about how to drive that innovation, that investment? How are we attracting clean energy companies to move here to the city? How are we creating this ecosystem that's supportive of growth of this economy? And so working through these cross partners and this collaborative efforts is really where I see the future, at least for the next couple of years, right? We are going to have to lean hard on the smart minds that we have in the room that are deeply committed to this work, and really let go of that, those silos of, I work in this sector, I work in this sector. If we want this to survive and to keep that growth and that momentum going, and in light of everything that's happening at the federal level, we really just have to dig in and work hard to make that happen.
And I love hearing, it gives me hope, I think, for next steps, next several years, drawing on those partnerships, thinking of the ecology of our systems and our scales of impact, and the way that we can come together and support each other locally to make a difference and to draw on those resources. And, I don't know if you all use the analogy of the silo. We are, Illinois is kind of a farm state. If you looked outside, you wouldn't think that. But, we've got a lot of silos in Illinois. And so the figurative ones we need to break down. And so thinking about ways to connect and to collaborate and to energize, right? And so I'm hoping that that's something you can take away from this really exciting panel of rock stars, or blues legends, if you will, from Chicago and Illinois. So please give them a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.